Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry to interrupt your conversation, Councillor, but we are 2 o'clock, I think, is about where we are. First things is a safety warning.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. If the fire alarm does sound, can you please make your way out of the building? The nearest exit is back through the door that you came through and down the staircase, or there's a exit behind us. The fire assembly point is in the front car park by the exit barrier, and please do not use the lifts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Apologies and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. We received apologies from councillors Akinwale, Holtzman and Councillor Whelan. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, anybody got any declarations of interest on any of the items this afternoon? No? Okay. Is there any reason, we are now on item number 3. Is there any reason why I shouldn't later on sign the minutes as being a correct record? That is the minutes of the 1st of November. Any reason I shouldn't sign it? Okay, thank you. Members of the public, not all of you have regularly attended here, so I'm going to say something that might bore some people, but I hope it's good for others. You're very welcome here, and I'll let you know roughly what's going on. My name is Bill Hunt, I'm the chairman. Along here we have my colleagues who are the members, and they will be the ones who will be making the decisions. Over here we've got planning officers, legal experts, and people who are going to help us and advise us while we're going along. So it's the decision makers here and the advisors are here. We would normally plan a comfort break at about 2 hours. The toilets are either out of that door, turn left, or straight on out of that door. You're welcome to go at any time. If it is something, if it doesn't fall that way, I might go earlier or later, but I'd ask you to respect that. And I think, yes, I've also got, it may affect some people. I'm just letting you know that tomorrow, the decision about the Sonica solar farm will be made public. We don't know what the answer is yet. Nobody does, but the government are going to announce it tomorrow. And that is going to be the final decision. That comes under Chairman's announcement. So we now move to item number 5, and I'll ask the officer to make the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 5 is the proposal for the confirmation of Tree Preservation Order E0923 for a oak tree at the front of 11 to 13 Limes Close, Wilburton. So here you can see the TPO plan showing the location of the tree. So the points of consideration by the members are the opinion of the local residents who want the TPO confirmed, which is the parish council, the objections to the TPO from the developer of the site, and the amenity value of the tree and its visual impact its loss would have on the landscape. This is a photograph of the tree prior to the development with the stack of logs there, which is an old-fashioned way of drying timber for burning. That's what that's for. Okay. And here are some photos of the tree from site. Those that came on site visit will have seen some of these views, particularly, please note, this one here, the distance of the tree from the scaffolding and the building. It's of particular relevance to the objections. Otherwise, the picture up here shows it as well. Okay. So the tree is visible from neighbouring and residents and makes a visual impact contribution to the local landscape. The location provides a wildlife habitat. The oak was assessed for a TPO on its amenity value, as that's the only requirement for serving a tree preservation order. It's required for the expediency due to the threat of removal from the developer, as they've submitted an email asking for that. So hence why the trees officer went out and had a look at it. Okay. The objections to the confirmation of the TPO are detailed in the report, but briefly it's due to the presence of deadwood within the crown, the limited ecological and environmental benefits, low branches that allow the possibility of the tree to be climbed by children, the proximity of the crown to the new buildings, and that a TPO will adversely affect the approved development, causing ongoing maintenance cost. The trees limiting the site layout, land use and internal layouts of the dwellings and the approved development site. Briefly, the confusions, the members asked to consider and weigh up the local residents' opinion and the TPOs and the objections to it. So my opinion is that the amount of deadwood is of little concern in the long run, as the deadwood is common amongst trees. There are over 2,300 species of animal, insect and plants associated with the species of oak. Tree climbing can be managed through supervision or prohibited by a sign. The tree is clearly visible. It's not hidden behind any properties. It's visible to anybody who walks past. The tree branches are in excess of 2.5 meters from the nearest dwelling, which can be managed by minor pruning. The development was designed around the retention of the tree from the start of the planning process, given its high categorisation as part of the initial assessment of the tree. The TPO should not affect the development's layout and design, as this has already been approved with the tree in place, and the unit's layout was also approved as part of this. So a democratic decision is sought on whether to confirm the TPO and support the protection of the tree. TPO will require owners to apply for the council's permission to works to the trees and agree appropriate and reasonable tree work specifications. If, in addition to that, if the council refuse an application to do work to the trees, there is the possibility to appeal that decision to PINS. The recommendation for the planning committee members is to consider the residents' opinion in support of the TPO and protection of the oak and the preservation of the oak tree, and the developer's opinion on opposing the tree preservation order. When deciding to confirm the TPO, if they agree with the residents, the tree officer supporting the amenity value of the tree listed in the schedule. If the tree is confirmed, the council can decide and consider free work applications suitable for the tree, specifications, and agree it. If it's not confirmed, the council will be unable to prevent the loss of the tree and its ecological and amenity contribution. Let's finish with the map, and that's it. Thank you.
Well, we haven't got any speakers for or against this particular item. So members, have you any questions of the officer? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. If we agree this preservation order, I just wonder, does the applicant have the right to appeal against our approval? And secondly, no, that's it.
They, as far as I know, they can't object to it, but what they could do is submit a tree work application requesting the trees removal, which would then go to the planning inspectorate for a determination.
Councillor Trout.
Thank you very much. I sort of read, of course, the objection, and I thought your replies were very substantially sort of showing that actually those objections were perhaps slightly spurious. I don't know, but they weren't, and I'm glad that also that children will be able to climb such a tree. It sounds a marvelous tree to climb, and I wish I had one of those outside up my garden, or my house when I was young, because I did climb trees, and I thought, well, if you fall down, you take responsibility. So thank you very much for comprehensively replying to the objectors' points. Thank you.
This section was actually questions to the officer, but not, we will move on to debate later. Councillor, have you got a question? Oh, I thought you had. Right. Now, if there are no more questions, we'll now move on to debate. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Having looked at the tree in actuality in our site visits, I thought this is a really lovely tree, a beautiful tree in exactly the right position, very clearly viewable from the road. And I certainly feel that we ought to keep it as long as possible, perhaps for the remainder of its 950 years, because these trees can last 1,000 years, can't they?
As we get we're in the debate now, as a personal level, I would be proposing that we agree with the officer and accept his recommendation, but we will continue. And am I taking that, Councillor Lay, that you are seconding that? We will continue the debate now, and we made a note. Councillor Ambrose Smith.
I was initially, before we visited the site, concerned. I don't particularly like TPOs because I think they're vicious. However, I was impressed with the sight of the tree as you approached the estate, and I think it does add something to it. I was concerned that the proximity of the tree to two of the houses might cause structural problems or something of that nature further down the line, but I was assured that the foundations had been adequately built to withstand that. My other concern was if the tree was assigned to a particular property, if the maintenance cost would fall upon one of the owners. And again, I was told that this would be dealt with by a management company or something of that nature. So no one property would be, having to make good the cost of it. So I would be very happy to fall in with my colleagues.
Got Councillor Trapp.
Looking at that tree, I think, and also the fact that the development was based around that, the retention of that tree, it seems clear that we should be keeping it and making sure that it will form. And I think that development will be quite bare without that tree. It would be soulless. And I think that actually adds a lot of character, and because it's been designed around having that tree there. So I would certainly say, I would have proposed it or seconded had I been not so slow.
I think you'd be about fifth now, Councillor, but I only record the first two.
Always late, I know.
I think it's fair to say that there seems to be an opinion amongst the members, and we have a proposal proposed by me and seconded by Councillor Lay, and I think it was a point that Councillor Trapp made, that the tree was there many, probably even hundreds of years before the development, and it was part of the development, and also that the actual tree is on a public open space. And I think it's beholden on the developers to make it fit in with this tree. And I think it's inappropriate to want to change it after the building has been done. So we're going to go to a vote now. Are those in favour of supporting the officer's recommendation as proposed by myself and seconded by Councillor Lay? Well, that's unanimous, so the tree preservation order is confirmed. We now move on to agenda item 6, and Charlotte will make the presentation.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Item 6. Item 6 relates to the erection of a 3-bedroom chalet dwelling with outbuilding and associated works at 22 Mill Street, Isleham. The application site is shown on the screen now and is outlined in red, and the blue land indicates the applicant's wider ownership. This plan shows the development site in relation to neighbouring dwellings, including a large dwelling to the south of the approved, which was approved at committee in August 2018. The proposals include the demolition of an existing garage and timber shed to allow for the access to the rear of the site, a rearrangement of the existing parking for number 20 and 22 whilst maintaining the current quantity of parking, and the provision of a turning area for vehicles to leave the site in a forward gear. Amendments have been received throughout the course of this application to remove the gates proposed to the rear of the plot, changes to the turning provision on the site, and provision of suitable delivery vehicle turning. The main planning considerations are shown on the slide now. This application is being presented to committee today as it's been called in by Councillor Huffer. The site sits within the development envelope identified in both the local plan as amended 2023 and in the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan. Officers therefore consider the site to comply with Policy Growth 2 of the local plan and Policy 1A and 2 of the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan. When looking at the context of the site, this proposal would form the 3rd dwelling in a backland location along Mill Street. The proposed dwelling, much like the neighbouring dwelling to the south, takes access from an existing driveway from Mill Street. These rear dwellings are detached in nature with large rear gardens. Officers therefore consider this application, which proposes a modest-sized detached dwelling, to be responding to its context. It's also considered that the application does not create any significant adverse effect on the character and appearance of the area, alongside satisfying all other material considerations as addressed in this presentation and in the circulated committee report. In this instance, we think that the principle of development is therefore acceptable. So with regards to residential amenity, the proposed dwelling would have a rear private amenity space in excess of 50 metres squared or 538 square feet, compliant with the Design Guide SPD. The garden to number 18 would remain the same as existing, with a shortening of the garden to number 22, which accommodates the proposed parking arrangements. I'll have to apologise as the area measurement for number 22's amenity space is incorrect on the slide. It should read 98.9 metres squared, which is 1,064 square foot, not 324 as it says on the slide. Number 20 does not have any existing private rear amenity space at the moment, and therefore no changes have occurred to this dwelling as part of this application. With regards to the outbuilding, the building would be approximately 43 metres or 141 feet from the rear of number 16 Mill Street, of which the garden of number 16 abuts the boundary where this outbuilding will be placed. Officers consider the siting of this outbuilding to be a considerable distance from neighbouring dwellings, and by nature of its single-storey form of 2.5 metres or 8 foot to the eaves and 4 metres or 13 feet to the ridge, would therefore not be considered to cause harm through overshadowing, overbearing or loss of light on privacy. It is not considered that the size of the outbuilding will be substantially taller than those currently in situ, and therefore it's not anticipated that any substantial harm would come of the construction. The proposed dwelling is 43 metres or 101 foot from the rear of the dwelling fronting Mill Street, and is therefore not considered to be overbearing in its nature. The distance between the first floor window in the front elevation of the proposed dwelling and the existing first floor rear window of number 22 is 30 metres or 98 feet, which is significantly in excess of the requirements in the Council's Design Guide SPD. The proposed bathroom window to the first floor is not considered to be a habitable room. However, we would look to condition this as part of any approval to obscure the glazing in the interest of maintaining residential amenity. The proposals are therefore considered to be acceptable in line with ENV 2 of the local plan as amended and policies 1A, 2 and 3 of the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan. With regards to visual amenity, the character of Mill Street is relatively mixed, including dwellings sat back from the highway. The proposed dwelling would be located next to a substantial property of modern materials that include high quantity of glazing, cladding, which was approved at committee in August 2018. This application proposes a design that is sympathetic to the character of the dwellings fronting Mill Street, including number 20 and 22 that sit within the site. The proposed dwelling is smaller than that of number 26 in a backland location and is a chalet-style home compliant with policy 3 of the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan that requires proposals to be of 2 stories or fewer and to relate to the character present in the village and include visual interest in the architectural design of that dwelling. Officers have concluded that the form, massing and characteristics of the development have been taken into account, including the choice of materials and design features that are reflective and are appropriate to the heritage asset at the front of the site, which is number 18 Mill Street. Since the previously withdrawn application, a garage has been removed from the proposals to reduce any potential for overlooking or overbearingness on neighbouring dwellings. In removing this element, it's enabled the site to allow for more open space and less built form along the way. And taking into consideration the existing pattern of the street scene, where there's already examples of dwellings sitting behind those on Mill Street, the site is comparable to its adjoining neighbours, and on this basis, the proposal is considered to maintain the character of the area. Comments have been received from the council's conservation officer, which can be summarised on the slide as you can see. He considered there to be a lack of visual impact on the conservation area and a neutral impact on the heritage asset, and therefore be in compliance with policy ENV 11 and ENV 12. With regards to other technical matters involving highways, parking, biodiversity, flood risk and drainage, all are considered to be in accordance with the policies in the local plan and of the National Planning Policy Framework. As members will recognise from the site visit this morning, these are photos from the development site. On the left is looking from Mill Street towards the rear of the site along the access drive. And to the right is looking at the neighbouring new dwelling at the rear of number 24 from in front of the garage and the shed where we went today. On the left is looking towards the rear of the garden from the back of the garage. This has been taken in winter. And the image on the right is of the rear, from the rear of the garage looking towards the neighbouring development, and that's been taken during the summer. The image to the left is looking down the existing garden under the applicant's control towards number 22, 18 and 16. And the image on the right is looking towards the rear of the garden, from the rear of the garden towards the existing garage. And finally, for the images, on the left is the existing outbuildings on the site, which would be where the new outbuilding is placed. And then on the right is the view from the outbuildings area towards the neighbouring dwelling. If we move on to the planning balance, it's considered that the proposal would not result in a significant adverse impact to the character and appearance of the area, and is therefore considered to comply with policies ENV 1 and ENV 2 of the local plan as amended, and policy 3 of the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan. It's also considered that the proposals are acceptable in line with policy ENV 2 of the local plan and policies 1A, 2 and 3 of the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan, and would not cause significantly detrimental effects on the residential amenity of neighbouring occupiers. The proposal is therefore considered to be acceptable in all other aspects, including the impacts of the proposal on the character and appearance of the area, amenity of neighbouring occupiers and highway safety. The proposal complies with all other relevant local plan policies and the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan. It's therefore considered that no demonstrable harm would arise from this proposal, and on this basis, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fairly comprehensive, and yes, a very comprehensive and commendable proposal. We now have our first speaker, who is Zoe Mellors of 16 Mill Street, Isleham. You have 5 minutes. I don't know if you've spoken before, but you have 5 minutes. An amber light will come on at 4 minutes. And switch the microphone on this. Thank you. Away you go.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd first like to point out an important error in entry 7.2.7 of the agenda. It states the positioning of the proposed dwelling is set back from the existing dwellings on this site and is located approximately 23.5 metres west of the garden number 16. It is 3 metres south and not 23.5 metres west. Otherwise, I wouldn't be objecting. In April 2022, the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan referendum produced a landslide of 92% in favour of the plan, and it was adopted by East Cambridgeshire in May 2022. It states that infill should be seen as subordinate to existing dwellings on the original plot. New dwellings may have the same overall number of stories as the existing dwelling, but occupy a smaller footprint and should read as subordinate. This proposed development does not comply with this. It occupies a much greater footprint and is not subordinate. The footprint is 55% larger than the existing at number 22 and is taller than number 22 when, according to local plan, it should be no bigger or higher than existing on the plot. This proposal therefore fails to meet the local adopted plan on size, footprint and height. And as this is, to our knowledge, the first infill application after the adoption of the local plan, we would like to think that the local council's time and money spent developing the neighbourhood plan and holding referendum would not be ignored at the first opportunity, and that local communities' view is respected. On other points, we are the only house objecting because we are the only one impacted by this proposal. As the applicant owns 3 properties at 18, 20 and 22 Mill Street and his relative owns number 26, the lack of objections should be read bearing this in mind. Planning officers made comparisons with the scale of number 26, which was granted planning permission in 2018, but this was before the referendum and is not part of the original plot we are discussing. We didn't know about any intentions to build until after number 18 was bought by the applicant, when plans had already been drawn up and were about to be submitted. There was no dialogue with us. When we bought our cottage in March 2015, my partner and I did so because the large garden was not overshadowed at the end, and we would have the potential to be self-sufficient as possible growing fruit and vegetables. To put that in context, the first 17 metres of our garden are in shadow October to the end of March by the applicant's existing 2 houses. So that area is unsuitable for growing food for 6 months. So we use the last 36 metres of our garden to supply fruit and vegetables, which we eat fresh or preserve to enjoy throughout the year. Previous owners also use this garden area for producing food and rearing chickens. So the scale and positioning of this proposed house and outbuilding will have an overbearing impact on this area of our garden. With a ridge height of 7 metres, that is nearly 4 times the height of the 1.8 metre dividing fence. With the dormer windows at 6 metres, the side of 8.6 metres along the fence, this will give approximately 50 square metres of bulky render 3 metres from our vegetable area and on our southern side, so no sunshine. And with a 4 metre high outbuilding at the western end of our garden, we would feel incredibly boxed in by the sheer scale and bulky nature of the proposal. I cannot stress enough that this application will cause a devastating loss of sunlight, casting huge long shadows at crucial times over our fruit, trees and vegetable garden. It is not right that our ability to grow food should be impacted. It would be a severe loss of amenity to us and the environment, plus the financial impact of having to buy more food. Details of the overshadowing using Google Earth and a shadow calculator were supplied with our objection letter. We did ask the application for a sunlight appraisal, but it wasn't done. We are happy for the area to be developed to give the applicant the opportunity to build a new home, but at a size and scale that works with the adopted local plan, such as making it smaller than existing, moving it further down the plot and using a hipped roof. That doesn't affect the amenity of the surrounding land. I'd also like to point out that if this plan gets approval, all of numbers 20's garden would be consumed by this application. It will never have a garden in the future as it will be built upon. I kindly ask that you please respect the democracy of the Isleham voters and reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. If you just wait where you are. Members, questions? That's
I think one should always ask a question. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for allowing us in your garden, which seems to be very, very well maintained. Far better than mine, I think. And you mentioned it is quite close. I mean, I don't know. I've got these plans ahead of me here, but you're saying it's the proposed dwelling is about 3 meters away from your boundary fence. Is that right?
No, that is correct.
Okay. If this building were, shall we say, canted over sideways and put in the other more towards the corner of that plot, would that be?
That would help because it would stop the shadows falling over our vegetable
And
garden.
also the overbearingness of it
Yes,
as well.
Yes,
Okay, and the outbuilding as well would not make much effect on you, would it? The
Not
proposed
really, but in the scheme of things, we'll have a block on one side of 50 square meters of render.
Yeah.
And then we'd have the block at the end, and then we've got the neighbours' trees there. It'd be sort of like living in a tunnel.
Yes, I can see that, yeah. Thank you very much, yes,
Yeah,
that's,
thank you.
I think that's all. Yes, it is, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed. And we now have Mr. Greg Sabaton, the applicant, or on behalf of the applicant. If there's two of you, both come up, it's fine. I think you know you've got 5 minutes. The amber light will come on at 4. And when you do speak, turn the microphone on, please, and start when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Thank you for allowing us to speak today. We were approached last year by my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Clark, to apply for a detached dwelling on their existing parcel of land. Mr. Clark has lived in the village all of his life and would love to continue to do so. This is a very confusing site, as you may have seen on your site visit earlier today, so I'll try and explain as best as I can the current situation. Mr. Clark purchased number 20 when he was single over 20 years ago. When he met his future bride and they got married, they purchased number 22, which is the adjoining property, and have lived there for a further 14 years. They managed to retain number 20, and that is currently rented out. After my initial site visit to meet Mr. and Mrs. Clark, number 18, which is the dwelling fronting the main road, came up for sale, and they managed to remortgage to purchase this property as well. This meant that they were now in a strong position solely owning the access and the very, very large rear garden to the rear, which would enable them to look into the possibility of building their dream home. My client's sister has recently built to the left of my client's proposal, which is a very large detached dwelling with an adjoining annex built for Mrs. Clark and Mr. Clark's mum to move into later in life, surrounded by her family. The original application was requested to be withdrawn by the original planning officer because of the confusion of the site parking and also the size of the dwelling we were proposing with the garage at the front. We have now produced an improved design that is a lot smaller than the original proposal in height and width to overcome the original issues, together with removing the garage at the front. My client, for once, didn't want a massive 4-bedroom, 2-story property. They requested a country-style cottage to suit the surrounding area and only require 3 bedrooms. We've now set the dwelling a further 3 meters away from both side boundaries to try and eliminate objections from the neighbours at number 16. We also removed the garage that was proposed to try and please the neighbour and have proposed a small storage building in the rear garden instead. In addition to this, we have also set the proposed dwelling a further 5 meters or 15 feet back to please the neighbours. The distance now that the dwelling has been set further back is over 48 meters or 157 feet away from the rear of number 16, so overlooking will not be an issue. Number 16 also mentioned during the application process that their garden would feel boxed in, even though their hedge at the time was over 5 meters high. Since these comments have been posted online, the existing hedge has been reduced to 2 meters in height, with additional foliage even cleared in places near to where Mr. and Mrs. Clark are proposing their outbuilding. My client's solicitor has confirmed number 16 has an 8-foot historic right-of-way over my client's access road, and this does allow for them to drive on and off-site, but not to park or block the access for any other vehicles at any time. We have also maintained the clear passage across the garden of number 22 to allow number 16 to walk across to their garden should they need to. I highlighted the issues with the existing parking arrangements with Mr. and Mrs. Clark on our initial site visit. Number 20 had 2 tandem parking spaces on the left-hand side and were forced to reverse out onto the main road. Because of the tandem parking, the actual driveway was very narrow for the other property to drive past. Now that my client owns the access and the properties, as part of this design, we were able to give 2 parking spaces to numbers 20, 22, and the proposed dwelling, and have plenty of space to turn on site and leave out onto the main road in forward gear, which would be much safer. This has also been confirmed as an improvement and approved by County Council Highways Department. On this resubmission, we have also increased the garden space to the existing dwelling number 22, which will have just under 100 square metres, and this was requested by the original planning officer. The parish council made comment about the proposal being too close to my client's sister, but we are now over 4 metres or 13 feet away from their blank wall. We have met the East Cambs design guide criteria for building a dwelling with a plot size of well over 300 square metres, ample turning and parking, ample distances for the prevention of overlooking, and well over 50 square metres of garden space required. Our proposal is also inside the development envelope of the village and now has the backing of the original planning officer and the new planning officer on this case. Mr. Clark is here beside me today should you have any further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've now got questions to the applicant and the applicant's agent. Members, have you got questions? Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. I understand all these things, and it's great that actually I'm getting very confused about this number 18 or 20 as these turning. There's a lot of diagrams here about turning circles, and it's good that actually there'll be turning for number 20, is it? As opposed to, I mean, just a question I just posed to the residents.
We'll deal with that. You've asked a question and
There's a question coming.
No, you've asked one already.
I can't ask two.
Okay, I was going to say deal with one at a time.
Okay, right.
And so you can have more questions.
No, that was
ask-
that was part of the statement, actually.
Mr. Councillor Trapp, please will you let
Okay,
the
all right.
applicant answer your first question.
Are they answering the question?
No, well, then you can continue.
Thank you very much. Had you considered the question I posed actually to the number 16, I think it's number 16, about had the house been turned round a bit and therefore not been so overbearing onto their land? Had you considered that possibility? It also would mean that the solar panels would be aligned south on that roof, because at the moment it's running north-south, the ridge of that dwelling.
So we're proposing there's solar panels on the garage as well. With regards to turning it round, it would be a struggle to get the property in that position to have a rear garden as well for the proposed dwelling.
And we'd already set it further across because the planners requested that. It was closer to the boundary on the original application.
Thank you very much.
Okay, it has been said that the number 20 would have no garden at the end of this thing. Is that correct?
Number 20 doesn't have a garden.
It doesn't have one now.
No, it hasn't since I've owned it.
So it's not got one now, and it won't have one in the future.
No.
Okay, thank you. Any more members' questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Mr. Richard Radcliffe is the chairman of Islington Parish Council. I think you've been here before, sir, so you'll know the system.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Richard Radcliffe, Chair of Islington Parish Council. My council objects to this infill scheme. My council's objections to this infill scheme are set out clearly in your officer's report, in that the proposed development is of a scale which is not in accordance with Policy 3, the character and design of the Islington Neighbourhood Plan, and the detailed guidance set out in Appendix 5, and it impacts on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties. Policy 3 of our neighbourhood plan states that development proposals must deliver high quality design through developing through delivering a development that is appropriate for the site and not result in unacceptable impacts on the amenity of occupants of neighbouring or nearby properties. Detailed design guidance in Appendix 5 states that the infill should adopt a scale, density and grain of the context of the area, be in proportion to its plots. The scale and the massing of each building should as a rule be no bigger or higher than the existing building and no higher than the surrounding buildings. Distinguish backland development from the older linear village pattern. It should be seen as subordinate to the existing dwellings on the original plot. New dwellings may have the same overall number of stories as the existing dwellings, but occupy a smaller footprint and should read as subordinate. They should also set the key facade of the new building perpendicular to the main road and behind existing dwelling is recommended. This development appears to be bigger than the existing buildings on the site, is not seemingly subordinate, nor is its key facade perpendicular to the road or to the existing dwelling. The applicant states that the proposed dwelling will not have any impact on the existing dwellings or the street scene as it is stepped back at least 53 metres from the main road. However, the proposed dwelling will be clearly visible from Mill Street. Is that an impact or is it not? Your officer's report seems to conclude that because a much larger house was granted planning permission in 2018, then this smaller scale proposal is acceptable, rather than considering its setting and impact on the properties within the site and to those to the north. Isleham Neighbourhood Plan was adopted with overwhelming support from the village in 2022 to provide guidance for future development. This guidance was not available in 2018 when permission was granted for this large and neighbouring dwelling. Our neighbourhood plan was developed in response to concerns that development was being undertaken with little or no local guidance or influence. It aims to help good development within our village to ensure that the demand for new housing is justified, carefully planned, and will have a positive impact on the village's distinctive character and semi-rural environment. This is unfortunately not the case for this development. The proposal has unacceptable impacts and is contrary to policy 3 of the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan and the detailed design guidance set out in Appendix 5 of the plan. For these reasons, my council recommends that this application should be refused.
Thank you. Members, questions? Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much for that presentation. There seems to be a conflict. The planning officer said that policy 3 is actually accepting. You are saying policy 3 is not, is being broached. So it'd be nice to clear this up.
I believe that planning, as you know, is a matter of balance, isn't it? And therefore your planning officer has decided that the balance is in favour of accepting that development. I would submit that our neighbourhood plan should be given more weight and that it doesn't comply to enable, so therefore basically it should be refused.
And you also mentioned the fact that this development is going to be larger than any of the other buildings, except for number 26, which seems to be an aberration, or seems to be there. But it is larger, and certainly looks like 22 on this plan, and certainly 20, 18 and 16, is that right?
If you take them as individual properties,
Is
then yes,
as individual properties, yeah.
that is my interpretation of the plans as best as I could do.
Right, thank you very much.
Councillor Lay.
Yes, I just wonder whether or not anywhere within the village we've broken the adopted local plan, or will this be the first property to be given planning permission outside what was recommended in the adopted local plan, neighbourhood plan?
My understanding, and I think your planning officer was quite clear, that under the first 2 policies within the plan, that the development was acceptable. It was under the character and design, and I need a bit of help here. I haven't got the plan directly in front of me. But it was under that aspect of the policy that we considered this development would fall foul. But there have been various other developments that have happened within our village that have been approved subsequent to the adoption of our neighbourhood plan.
Okay, councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. What is the logic behind the neighbourhood plan's requirement that this house should be smaller than number 22? That seems to be the main objection, that it's larger. But is there a reason why it should be smaller, other than that's what the neighbourhood plan says?
Yes, I think it's because our village has seen a lot of infill development of larger properties which seem to dominate the sites and are more dominant than the existing dwelling that they've been basically built in the back garden of. So they have changed quite considerably the street scene and the nature of our village, I would say.
Any other questions? No, so as I understand it, then it's a matter of personal judgment here, really, about whether one is dominating the other, or when it's in your neighbourhood plan.
I think it's very clear that the neighbouring property, which I think is a very large property, and that was built before our neighbourhood plan was adopted.
Right,
and it's a collective view of the parish council, not my personal view.
okay, thank you. We've got councillor Huffer, who we were going to read out a letter, but it seems that you are feeling a bit better, and so of course you're welcome to speak for 5 minutes. Well, we hope you get better soon.
Thank you, Chair, and members of the committee, for allowing me to address you today. I will keep this mercifully brief. I called this application into this committee because I feel the concerns of the parish council and the neighbouring properties need to be heard by a wider audience. And while the concerns of the Highways Authority were finally mollified, the issue that concerns both the parish council and the neighbouring property have not been addressed. They feel, as I do, that this development is overbearing and dominant to its immediate neighbours. The total loss of any garden to number 20 is unacceptable. The parish council spent months putting together their neighbourhood plan, and the residents voted overwhelmingly to adopt it. This infill property is clearly in breach of the infill policy of the neighbourhood plan, and in contradiction of other policies with regard to character and street scene and the impact on the listed building at number 18 Mill Street. The applicant's agent spoke about the family owning the properties and building for their mother and who else. Can I remind the committee that planning permission is not granted to a person or a family, but to the plot. This development and all the other properties owned by the applicant could be sold at any time to anybody. So that argument doesn't bear any weight. I would ask the committee to refuse this application and support the Isleham neighbourhood plan that they spent so many hours and so much of people's time putting together, that has been completely supported by the community. If we breach this today, what was the neighbourhood plan all about? We have to support the Isleham neighbourhood plan. And the opinion is that this breaches the Isleham neighbourhood plan on at least 3 counts. Thank you very much, committee.
Members, questions for councillor Huffer? Well, you're first in the queue.
Am I? Thank you very much. You said 3 counts. I was just waiting for you to say what 3 counts.
Sorry. The character, the street scene, and the fact that it is a larger building than its mother, if you like, or its parent. So in other words, it's the subservient building would dominate, irrespective of what number 26 is. That was pre the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan 2018, some 4 years before. And I don't think we can give any weight to the fact that number 26 was built prior to the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan. This is all about supporting the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan, in my opinion.
I agree with you. I think neighbourhood plans should be supported.
Members? No? Okay. Thank you very much
Thank you,
indeed. We've now got any extra comments from the officer?
I think just to reiterate the point that number 20 hadn't had a garden in the first place, so there's no change to the residential sort of private amenity space for that. We would sort of say that this dwelling is sort of proportionate to its surroundings. I know we've said that in terms of the neighbourhood plan, the number 26 was before the neighbourhood plan was brought into set. But it is smaller than that. It is 1.5 story chalet dwelling. We feel it is subservient to the site, and it does sit in its context very well. We've had no objections to the site. Everything's fine in terms of the statutory consultees, and our conservation officer is happy that there is no impact on the conservation area and is neutral harm to the listed building.
Thank you. We now move on to questions to the officer. Councillor Wilson.
These originally apparently was going to be a garage for this new house, but it's decided to make it parking spaces rather than a garage. I believe that's correct.
That is correct, yes.
Is there any way that subsequently the owner of the new building would not decide, well, I'd rather like a garage, and would be able to do it under with I forgot what the term is. No, it's yes, it does exactly so. Just do it without having the extra planning permission. Or are we specifically excluding extra bits added to this?
Let me just check, 2 seconds. So we're not taking away any permitted development rights in terms of applying a garage. We've only looking to remove it for gates and fences, and obviously to obscure the glazing to the bathroom window at the front.
So in that case, new owner could put a garage up above the 3 parking spaces under permitted development.
If it met the permitted development requirements. Because it's the front of the to the dwelling, it would meet PD requirements.
So yeah, the only permitted development for outbuildings would be to the rear of the house. So you wouldn't be able to put a garage on the car parking spaces as permitted development, because that's to the front. But you could put outbuildings in the garden.
More questions for the officer? Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, for your presentation. The height of this building is 7 meters. I can't remember now when we walked it, whether it was slightly higher than 22. I can't remember what the ground was like. Do you know what the height of 22 is? And whether it's higher on the plot size as well.
Sorry, Tony's just gonna have a quick look to confirm the height of number 22.
Thank you very much. I should have asked the question on site, actually.
So the height isn't actually written onto the plan, but it looks at the site slightly slopes down. But the actual size of the dwelling to the rear is slightly higher, I think, than the dwelling to the front, but not by much.
Okay, so it's a meter high already to start with, and then it's got another 7.1 on top of that. Is that right?
Okay, so just having a quick look at these spot height levels. The front of the site, so number 18 is approximately 8.59. But then the back of the site goes up to 9.58, and that's the very back of the site. Looking at where the property sits, there is a slight incline of approximately and this is from number 18, so the front of the site, not number 22, would be approximately just under a metre. What the floor level of I haven't got the floor level of plot number 22, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
I'd just like to ask a couple of questions, if I may. How much weight do you give to the neighbourhood plan when you're carrying out an exercise like this? Because it appears that we've got a society or a village, a parish council who've made a lot of effort into their neighbourhood plan, and I always thought it had a significant weight.
Yeah, we do apply a significant weight to the neighbourhood plan, and we've obviously been through the policy inside and out. And as we've sort of assessed this against the application, we do feel that it meets the criteria that was set out in the neighbourhood plan. Therefore, we sort of the weight that we've applied to it works with the application.
Because it's difficult with us when we say that the author of the neighbourhood plan doesn't agree with this. And how far has the wheelie bin got to be wheeled to get to the public road?
So it looks to be about 20 to 30 metres. So it would be from the front of where the proposed dwelling is up
How
to the
many?
curbside. 20 to 30 metres,
And our rule is 30, I think.
I believe so.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions for the officers? Okay, well, we move on to general debate. So members, up to you. Councillor Lay.
Do you know, we are criticised by our parishes time and time again because they do all the work in adopting a local plan, and we as district councillors very often don't take enough notice of what the local elected people of the parishes want and they put into their local plan. I could not support this project on the grounds that the local plan, which is the work of the local people, are against it. So as far as I'm concerned, I shall vote against this.
Okay, we'll move on to Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you. I would take the contrary view. We're arguing about an interpretation of the local plan. Our officer has taken her professional view that it does comply. The parish council, who don't actually have, who are not trained planners, take the opposite view. Standing in that rather large, long plot this morning, it occurred to me that in actual fact, you would see very little of the new building to the rear. I think they've obviously taken great trouble to try and find something which is acceptable to the planners, and I would be voting to agree with the planning officer.
Councillor Wilson. I beg your pardon, Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. It's a difficult one, this. The applicant mentioned about the dream home, but I was just wondering whether this plot is not adequate enough size for this dream home, particularly since it is, I think, overbearing. It's 7 meters high. I'm not sure it is the right building for this plot, actually. And I should, if Councillor Lay is going to propose that we refuse this planning application, I will certainly support it, or if he's not proposing, then I will propose it.
Well, I had you down as being in favour, Councillor Lay. Does that become a proposal? Okay, so you're proposing it, Councillor Trapp
I
is
second
seconding it. Okay, we move on to Councillor Wilson.
I can fully understand the parish council's desire for smaller houses, because just the same in my own village of Hadnam, what we need is smaller houses, not lots of big ones. And the big ones tend to be the desire of developers and architects, and the small houses are what local people need, because they need to start living in a place where the house prices are already much too high for most young people anyway. So I was trying to find out what the logic behind the plan was to say that this was against it. And I think the argument is that what we want in infill places are smaller houses which can be afforded by people rather than the larger ones which probably can't be. So I will be supporting, opposing this particular application, because I think this house is too big for the particular site in view of the fact.
Councillor Wilson, the officer is to approve, and you're speaking.
I'm agreeing with Councillor Lay's proposal to oppose the officer's recommendation, because what the neighbourhood plan wants, I believe, are smaller houses in the village and not big ones put in the back gardens of places.
Right. Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to everyone quite closely on this, because I've been 50-50 either way. But the way I look at it now is that the neighbourhood plan came out after the building of the house next door. Therefore, this house is subservient to that and comes within the plans, because you can't pick and choose the dates you're going to choose when it's got to be subservient to. It's got to be from the date of your plan. So that doesn't hold as much water to me. Also, Councillor Wilson's just mentioned about smaller houses being available. If this gentleman's moving into his bigger house he's going to move, he vacates a smaller house for someone else to go into. So there is that as well to take in consideration. At the moment, I'm still 50-50 which way I'm going to vote.
Any other member comments? Councillor Trapp.
It sort of hinges on the neighbourhood plan. I think it may be that the reading of the neighbourhood plan by the planning officer was one way, but what we've seen from the parish council is that their interpretation of that neighbourhood plan is that it should not be having such big buildings. That it should, the whole neighbourhood plan idea was to keep development down to a sizable, to a smaller proportion. So that's why I think perhaps, I don't know whether the chairman of the parish council was part of the neighbourhood planning office proposal, but their interpretation is that it's trying to restrict larger developments. And I agree with Councillor Wilson that on the whole, we need smaller properties. So I shall still keep them in. it's one way or the other, but at the moment, that where it's sitting is going to be, I think, overbearing, and it's going to have an effect on other properties. So I'm going to stay with my original decision.
Well, the time's coming very close where you're going to have to make a decision. Are we absolutely sure we've got no more members' comments in the debate? No? Okay. Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Is it possible to get a comparison of the floor square meterage of the proposed new building as opposed to one of the cottages currently on the site? I mean, it didn't seem to as though the proposed new house was a particularly large house to me.
I imagine the application is clear about the square footage of the proposal, but I doubt very much whether officers have got the measurements of houses that aren't figuring in this application. I don't know if officers would like to make some.
House. I thought they were proposing what I would describe as a modern cottage.
Okay, so the the proposed property is 12.5 metres by 8.5 metres. When we look at plot number 22, 200. The dwelling for number 22 is 8.5 metres by 7 metres. Number 18 bear me a second, just number 18 is approximately 10 metres by 7 metres. Number 16 is approximately a frontage of 10 metres by 7.5 metres. So in terms of the footprints, they're not that dissimilar. They're obviously a slightly different shape, but they're not dissimilar to
But
18.
the new building is bigger than the existing building.
It's not, I wouldn't say it's not 50%. Because you've got number 16 is 10
Okay,
metres.
can we establish that they're bigger but not as
It's not substantial.
not substantial?
Not substantially bigger, and it is still a 3-bed property. It's not like it's a 4 or 5 bed.
Right, well, we're getting to the stage, unless everybody's got something else to say. Something else to say under the debate section. I think it is important that we take into account the neighbourhood plan, because I know that the villages have made a huge efforts to put this together. And so we should give a lot of weight to it. That's all I'm going to say to you, members. I'm now going to ask you to vote. And the vote is, we have a proposal from Councillor Lay, that is we go against the officer's recommendation. I was about to get on to that. Thank you for being so on my shoulder. Of course, if you're going to go against the officer's recommendation, you have to have reasons to do that. And obviously, I would suggest you discuss it with Councillor Trapp, who is your seconder.
Yes, I propose this because it's contrary to the neighbourhood plan.
Is that the only reason?
Yes.
Well, in particular, design is excessive and overbearing. Yes.
Outside the.
Thank you. We have a proposal from councillor Lay that it is against the neighbourhood plan and that it is overbearing. Is
Chair,
that right?
can I assist at all on the reasoning? 'Cause, just listening to the debate, I think, and looking at the Isleham neighbourhood plan, I think what the members seem to be concerned about is the scale of the building in relation to the scale of the buildings on the frontage. So it's in the opinion of the local planning authority, the proposed dwelling by reason of its excessive scale and height in relation to dwellings along the frontage would harm the character and appearance of the locality. The proposal therefore conflicts with the Isleham Neighbourhood Plan Appendix 5, which is detailed design in relation to infill development, which states that new dwellings should be no higher than frontage development. That's the essence of your concern, isn't it? It's the height of the new building in relation to the height of frontage buildings, isn't it?
So eloquently put.
Is that right?
Yes.
The main reason for not accepting your proposal for this planning application, in my view, is that it's not in line with the neighbourhood plan, and all our neighbourhoods would support that.
I think we go back to the planning.
Yeah, I think
director.
what I said in that reason is that it conflicts with that specific element of the neighbourhood plan, which is about infill development and height in relation to the frontage buildings. That's what you're concerned about. I don't think we need to go into footprint. It's height, isn't it? That's what the objective of the neighbourhood plan is, to make sure that infill development to the back of houses is lower than the frontage.
Could it not also be that the size of it as well, because that was in the neighbourhood.
Well, I
plan.
did say excessive scale and height.
Okay,
Yeah.
So we've got scale and height in there. Have you made a record of what it is? So we're going to clear what we're going to vote on as proposed. So will those in favour of the proposal that's been put by councillor Lay and seconded by councillor Track, please raise their hands. What were the figures? Okay, so will those who are in favour of the recommendation that the officer gave, please raise their hands. And that's against it, and there's no abstentions. Okay, so that application has been rejected. And thank you for the planning manager thank you for putting that into a more professional recommendation. Any members in favour of a comfort break at this point? No? 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 Okay, right, we move on to item number 7. And Richard, can we have your proposal?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Agenda item 7 seeks planning permission for a change of use from use class B8 storage to use class C3 residential, including the removal of storage containers, the erection of 4 detached dwellings and associated works, including relocating the access at land north west of 9 Streatham Road, Wycombe. The application has been brought to planning committee in accordance with the requirements of the council's constitution as the proposal is a departure from the development plan. As a matter of housekeeping, I would just like to draw members' attention to the ward councillor consultation response within the committee report for agenda item 7, just to inform councillors that these comments were received from Councillor Vellacott. I've missed the name off on the report. So this slide shows the location of the application site on the northwestern edge of Wycombe. This slide shows the aerial photography of the site and the surrounding area. The main built-up part of the village can be partly seen to the southeast of the application site. The site is adjacent to open agricultural fields to the northwest and southwest, a residential property, number 9 Streatham Road, to the southeast, and Streatham Road to the northeast. Planning permission was granted in 2013 for a change of use of the front section of the site from agricultural lands to a storage compound. This slide shows a plan from the 2013 planning application, which shows the area of land with an authorised B8 storage use contained within the yellow boundary line. This slide shows some photos of the frontage of the site as seen from Streatham Road, and photos within the site which show the area with the authorised B8 storage use. And this slide shows some more photos within the site, also showing the authorised B8 storage use. So planning permission was granted in 2015 for a change of use of the rear section of the site from meadow to garden land, a C3 residential use. This slide shows a plan from the 2015 planning application, which shows the area of land with an authorised C3 residential use contained within the red line boundary. This slide also shows photos within the site which show the area of the authorised C3 residential use. This shows the site layout of the proposal with two two-story dwellings located towards the front of the site, 2 single-story dwellings located to the rear, a new access and shared driveway located centrally, and landscaping around the boundaries. The proposal includes the provision of a new footway to connect to the footways to the southeast, which would provide pedestrian connectivity to the village. On the left of this slide, you can see the proposed elevations of plot 1 and handed elevations of plot 4. On the right side, you can see proposed elevations of plot 2 and handed elevations of plot 3. This shows the street scene image and a site section of the proposal. The 2 dwellings furthest right on the street scene image are the 2 two-story dwellings proposed at the front of the site. The 2 dwellings to the left of them are number 9 Streatham Road and a dwelling sort of recently being constructed to the left side of that. This slide shows a street perspective of the site frontage as proposed. This slide shows a bird's eye perspective of the proposal. The main considerations relevant to the determination of this application are the principle of development, the impacts on the character and appearance of the area, residential amenity, highway safety and parking provision, biodiversity, flood risk and drainage, trees, archaeology, contamination, and energy and water efficiency. This slide shows the location of the application site circled in red in relation to the Wycombe Development Framework, which is outlined in black. On the southwest side of the road, the development framework boundary runs along the northwest boundary of an allocated site for housing, which is hatched in red and noted as WIC 1 on this map. The site is located approximately 65 metres from this development framework boundary. In respect to the principle of development, the application site is located outside of the Wycombe Development Framework, and the proposal is therefore contrary to policy growth to the local plan, which seeks to protect the countryside and ensure development is sustainable. The site comprises partly brownfield storage land with a B8 use class and partly residential land with a C3 use class. Officers consider that the application site is visually read as part of the village rather than the countryside and has a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the countryside. Officers consider that the proposal would not introduce residential development in an open countryside location and would provide visual amenity enhancements. And officers consider the site to be sustainably located with the provision of the proposed new footway. Therefore, officers consider that although the proposal conflicts with policy growth 2 of the local plan, the sustainable location of the site, the reuse of brownfield land and use of residential land, and the visual amenity enhancements to the site are all material considerations which indicate a departure from policy growth 2 would be justified in this specific case. The proposal would result in the loss of the existing B8 storage use. The site has not provided employment for over 6 years. The application is accompanied by a marketing report which demonstrates use of the site for employment purposes is unlikely to be viable. Officers consider that the proposed loss of the employment use is justified and the proposal accords with policy MP1 of the local plan. Officers consider that the principal development to be acceptable in this case. In respect to the character and appearance of the area, this site is located in a visually sensitive, prominent location on the edge of Wickham. Officers consider that the existing character of the site contributes negatively to the rural character and appearance of the countryside. Officers consider that the more sensitive boundary treatments and the higher quality landscaping would provide a softer and more open frontage and boundaries to the site than that which currently exists. Officers consider that a reduction of the hard standing and removal of the storage building, storage containers and other stored items from the site would enhance the character and the setting of the countryside. Officers consider that the proposed dwellings would be of a high quality design. Permitted development rights could be removed for alterations to the proposed dwellings for outbuildings, hard surfaces and fences, gates and walls. And officers consider that the proposal would enhance the visual amenity of the site and the character and appearance of the countryside in accordance with policies ENV1, ENV2 and the how-to of the local plan and guidance contained within the design guide SPD. In respect of residential amenity, due to the generous separation distances, the proposal would not result in any significant residential amenity impacts to nearby properties. Officers consider that the proposal demonstrates a high standard of residential amenity could be provided for future occupiers of the proposed dwellings. In respect of highway safety and parking provision, the proposal would remove the existing vehicular access and create a new access more centrally within the site frontage. The local highway authority has stated that the access is acceptable for a development of this scale and nature. The provision of the proposed new footway could be secured by a condition. Officers consider that the proposal would provide a safe and convenient access in accordance with policy COM 7 of the local plan. And officers consider that the proposal also provides sufficient parking provision in accordance with policy COM 8 of the local plan. In respect of biodiversity, with the exception of a semi-mature tree, which is to be retained and protected as part of the proposal, all on-site habitats are of negligible ecological importance. The proposal is unlikely to cause any adverse ecological effects, including to statutory and non-statutory designated sites. The proposal could achieve a significant biodiversity net gain. The ecological impact assessment recommends conditions to protect ecology. These could be secured by a condition. Officers consider the proposal would conserve and enhance biodiversity in accordance with policy ENV7 of the local plan and the council's natural environment SPD. In respect of flood risk and drainage, the site's located in flood zone 1, where the principle of development is acceptable in flood risk terms. Acceptable details of foul and surface water drainage could be secured by planning condition. Officers consider that the proposal has acceptable flood risk and drainage impacts in accordance with policy ENV8 of the local plan. In respect to trees, the proposal would remove category C trees of poor amenity value, including a small section of silver birch, which is sort of shown on the plan, circled in red, and the whole section of Leylandi at the front of the site, also shown on the plan. The council's tree officer has no objections. An arboricultural method statement, tree protection plan, and a high quality landscaping scheme could be secured by a condition. Officers consider the proposal would have acceptable arboricultural impacts in accordance with policy ENV7 of the local plan. In respect of archaeology, the site's in an area of archaeology potential and archaeology investigation and recording could be secured by condition. Officers consider the proposal has acceptable impacts in accordance with policy ENV 14 of the local plan. In respect of contamination, the council's scientific officer accepts the findings of the contamination report and recommends a condition requiring further investigation and remediation where necessary. Officers consider that the proposal has acceptable contamination risks in accordance with policy ENV 9 of the local plan. The proposal follows the zero carbon hierarchy and would provide a reduced carbon development through energy efficiency measures and the inclusion of renewable technologies in accordance with policy ENV 4 of the local plan and guidance contained within the council's climate change SPD. A detailed scheme of energy and water efficiency measures could be secured by condition. And in terms of the planning balance, in accordance with section 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, applications must be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Officers consider, although the proposal conflicts with policy growth 2 of the local plan, the sustainable location of the site, the reuse of brownfield land and the use of residential land, and the visual amenity enhancements to the site are all material planning considerations which indicate a departure from policy growth 2 would be justified in this specific case. It is considered that the proposal would provide a modest contribution in supporting the vitality of the rural community, and the proposal is considered to be acceptable in all other respects. The application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our objectors fall into another category by being in parish council and the district councillor. So we now move on to James Stone, who is the agent from Carter Jonas. I think you know what's involved here, but you've got 5 minutes. The amber light goes on at 4, and please make sure you do that. And away you go.
Okay. We think that this scheme represents a good opportunity to develop a unattractive brownfield site, which is on the edge of the village, which you would have seen from hopefully your visit today. The site has been vacant since 2016. It was previously commercial land. There has been an extensive marketing campaign to try and see if there are any interested commercial parties in this land, but no one's come forward. One of the main reasons we think is because of the fact it is so close to residential developments. That's putting people off from trying to operate there. Therefore, our concern is that if the site is not redeveloped for residential, it's just going to remain as a vacant, unattractive brownfield site, which it has for 6.5 years so far. Another thing which we think are probably important to raise, which I know members will be aware of already, is the overriding aim of policy growth 2. As you're aware, the site is just outside the development envelope for Wycombe. But what Google Earth doesn't show you, because it's out of date, is actually the site is connected to the urban environment of Wycombe. So in between the site and the development envelope, there's a allocated site, Wycombe 1, for about 3 to 5 houses. And there's another dwelling which is under construction at the moment, which you may have seen on site. Then you've got 9 Streatham Road and then the site. So it's totally linked to the village. It's not a floating site with any agricultural fields in between. So that's an important point to just to clarify. And the actual local plan states with regard to Wycombe that the purpose of the development envelope has been drawn to prevent sprawling to the countryside, which is a fairly commonplace thing for any local plan. But we do not consider this as sprawling to the countryside because it's attached to the built environment now, and it is brownfield commercial land. Therefore, we had pre-application discussions with the planning officers to discuss what was the best way of developing the site, given that the current status quo is not very acceptable to a lot of people. And we responded directly to the LPA's pre-application comments, which is to reduce it from 7 to 4 dwellings. Originally 7 was applied for at the pre-app stage. We've come in with 4 dwellings, which are, you can see from the proposed plans. Another thing we did was we reduced the 2 rear dwellings to bungalows, 3-bedroom bungalows, so that they reduce the impact on the countryside, and so that they also fit in with the barn that is located, a sort of outhouse barn that's located at number 9 Streatham Road, to fit in with that. And the 2 front dwellings were reduced to 1.5 stories so that they fit in with the street scene. Other benefits of the scheme, which you've probably read already in the planning statement or elsewhere, is that the site is within walking distance of all of the village facilities. It's within 750 metres of the village hall, the pub. It's even closer, very close to the bus stops We will be providing a significant biodiversity net gain of 25% for habitat units, which significantly exceeds the 10% that's coming in next month via central government, and then a 236% for hedgerow units. On the ground, the biggest benefit you'd possibly see is the actual landscaping improvements, because of the fact that there's a horrible close-boarded 1.8 metre fence along the front. That's going to be removed. There's going to be a hedge planted there with a 1.2 metre post and rail fence to give it a rural feel. And the boundary of the site is going to have a perimeter of a 3 metre ecology buffer, plus a native hedgerows to give it in a rural feel, plus the net gain benefits as well. There'll also be 3 additional trees planted in the open space area, which will be seen to some extent from the road. All houses will meet the national space standards, even though I don't think that the East Cambs plan requires that at the moment, but we're going to meet all the space standards anyway. So all 4 houses meet that. In addition to that, all 4 houses will meet the category M42 accessible and adaptable dwelling standards, which will benefit both older residents and also anyone with limited mobility, because it gives the ability for adaptability above and beyond standard building control, which is only category M41. There'll be still contributions, obviously, towards local infrastructure. And finally, the small scale of the scheme means that the site can be delivered very quickly and help to meet the council's expected windfall delivery of around, it was 50 dwellings a year the council predicted in East Cambs. So it will help to meet that, given that we could, this sort of site can be delivered pretty quickly. That's the end of the speech. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions from members? No?
You mentioned that it's, if I can be, sorry, I jumped the gun before being invited.
You are invited.
Thank you very much. The planning officer mentioned it was 65 meters away from the planning boundary. You seem to suggest that it was a sort of continuous strip of buildings along that.
Yeah, that's quite, so WIC 1 is the allocation. Originally, there was permission granted for 5 houses, and then they reduced it to 3. So that's either under construction or was due to start. That's an allocation. You can see the black line is the development envelope. Literally to the northwestern boundary of that, is it possible to use a cursor? Literally to the northwestern boundary on that plot of land just there is a dwelling currently under construction, which was granted last year. So there's a dwelling being built there, and then you've got the existing dwelling and our site. So my point is it's 60 odd meters to Wycombe 1, but it's totally connected to the built urban environment of Wycombe. It's not floating. There's no green space separating it. So this plan is actually out of date now because of what's being built on the ground.
Being built just northwest of that red.
Yeah. 3 houses in Wycombe 1 have got permission, and then just to the north of that, which is on that space of land, if you just go north, Richard, sorry. Yeah. Just there. There's 3, yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
If I may just butt in and ask the officer, where you said 1 is being built now, and you pointed to about halfway between the round one and the square one there, when was that permission? Was that given permission before we had the land supply?
Last year.
Well, I think since it's been brought up, it's quite important, because if it had permission during the period we had, we didn't have the 5-year land supply, then, well, that's been and gone, and we've now got it. So if on the other hand, it was within, it was after we had the land supply, then that alters the case totally, I think. So can we find out, is it easy to find out if that?
Yeah, can we adjourn for sort of have a comfort break and we can have a quick look?
Yes, I think this is quite an important issue. So it's now by that clock I'm looking at now. We'll have a 10-minute comfort break till 3:45.
Richard, I've got the reference if you want. On the references.
Okay, we're now back in session. We were asking Mr. Stone whether the house that was between, first of all, do you happen to know whether there's a house under construction? And
The house is under construction, yeah. This house is currently under construction. Permission was granted in July 2022, and it was not a 5-year land supply argument.
But what time did we have a 5-year land supply at that time?
We did, yes. Would you like me to sort of read? I can read through probably three sort of paragraphs of the officer report for that to kind of explain the situation for it. It's
yes,
in effect, it's the same.
It would be good to know because it makes more of a picture. So if you've got something you can read out.
Yeah. So in effect,
Mr. Stone.
In effect, it's on the basis that similar to this application, although the sites are very different, there was considered to be material considerations that outweigh the conflict with the development plan of the site being located outside the framework. So sort of three of the sort of relevant paragraphs that I'd like to read out is an appeal decision in a neighbouring authority evidences a situation where a site was outside of the defined development envelope and therefore an area of countryside. However, the development sat amidst an area of modern housing. The planning inspector noted the surroundings of the site were subject to large housing developments, meaning the development would occupy a gap in the existing housing. As such, the inspector determined, due to the surrounding context, the site had more of an affinity with the suburban form surrounding and did not result in an encroachment to the countryside. The appeal decision shares similarities to this site in Wicken, as the site is enclosed by residential developments. Furthermore, a recent appeal decision within East Cambridgeshire allowed a single dwelling outside of the defined development envelope under policy growth 2. Since defining the settlement boundaries as per the 2015 local plan, the surrounding area to the appeal site has seen approvals for small residential developments. As such, the planning inspector advised the development boundary no longer reflected the current situation. The inspector stated that whilst contrary to policy growth 2, the change in the character of the area amounts to a material consideration that justifies a decision as to variance with the development plan. For the current application, growth 2 is considered up to date, and as such, the presumption in favour of sustainable development is not engaged. The proposal conflicts with growth 2 due to the site's location outside of the local plan development envelope and forms a departure development. However, in accordance with section 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, there are a number of material considerations which are afforded weight in the consideration of the application. While the site is outside of the local plan's defined development envelope, the surrounding area has evolved through permissions for residential development since the development boundary was defined, meaning the site is now enclosed by residential development. In addition, the appeal decision within East Cambridgeshire notes the importance of considering changes to the character of an area, and when defining local plan boundaries no longer reflects the existing situation. The development of a single dwelling on this site would not encroach into the countryside, nor would it significantly change the character of the area as the site is enclosed by residential development. Therefore, the development would protect the countryside and the setting of the village, consistent with the framework. In review of all material planning considerations, the principle of one residential dwelling on the site is acceptable. So that's, as we were saying, on the basis that there's 3 houses being built in Wick 1, which is this site hatched in red. This was the site where 1 was approved, and this is where the existing number 9 is. So because it was infill between.
So number 9 is at the moment is the extremity of Wicken.
Yes.
That's the last one.
Yeah.
And the house that's being built is between number 9 and the development envelope.
It's between yes, it is, yeah. And within Wick 1, which is patched in red, there's also houses being built in there. So you've got at the moment between number 9 and where the crescent is, you've got a linear row of houses coming along here.
The number 9 is the entry to the village, and
yes,
it seemed that most of the ones you were talking about were single houses which were outside the planning envelope that the inspector agreed to.
The appeal decisions relating to other sites were single houses
And this,
outside of the
and this
envelope.
one's 4. Yeah,
Yes.
okay. We'll continue now. I think we want questions to the applicant. So Councillor Trapp.
Were you aware of the local plan and the need? This is not from the parish council, but clearly states the need for smaller units. Had you considered perhaps having a row of 4 cottages there instead of 2 large dwellings and a larger bungalows behind?
Yeah, we were guided by the council planning officers in terms of the size of dwellings that we provided, because we originally applied for 7 dwellings at the pre-app stage, and we were asked to provide 2 4-beds and 2 3-beds, given that there is no policy that requires us to have, for schemes that are minors like this, there's no policy requirement for smaller houses. And furthermore, there's not a neighbourhood plan in Wycombe like there are in some of your other villages. So there's no policy. I had a long look through the local plan, see if there are any policy requirements for, other sized dwellings, but there aren't. So we did what we felt was best for the character.
Thank you very much.
Members, any questions from the applicant? No? Okay. Thank you very much indeed. We now have Liz Houghton, the Chair of Wycombe Parish Council. You've got 5 minutes and the amber light will go on at 4. Start when you wish.
Good afternoon, everybody. If I can just pick up on that last point, so it's not part of what I proposed to say. That decision was a delegated decision by a planning officer. It took us 9 months to get a report to find out why it had been approved outside of the envelope. And that was the reason given. It should have come to this committee because it was outside growth 2. It never did. Wycombe Parish Council never had the chance to sit here and challenge it. There was a failure of process. And I feel that to consider that as a mitigating circumstance is irrelevant. So I will try and calm down now. So this is like Groundhog Day for me. I sit here again trying to protect our village from East Cambs planners and developers who see Wycombe as an opportunity to prove growth true 2 is not a requirement. Wycombe Parish Council opposes this application as detailed in the planning officer's report. This proposal is outside the defined growth 2 development for Wycombe. Development envelopes are there to protect against sprawl and ensure the unique character of a community is maintained. They are not there to be repeatedly challenged. As you know, Wycombe particularly suffered with speculative development when the local plan failed, and our housing stock has increased by 35% in 5 years as a consequence. Why is more being considered, let alone allowed? According to the recent review of the local plan, East Cambs does not need these houses to meet its housing supply. In fact, it has a reduced target. If this is allowed to go ahead, it will be held up as a precedent for every speculative application outside a development envelope in East Cambs. Last week, I attended the Parish Planning Forum, where a slide was put up which stated, and I quote, 5-year land supply does protect areas outside the framework. I asked the forum panel members whether this statement was correct, and they assured me it was. They also stated that the recent tweaks to the local plan helps fend off speculative developments. As we sit here today, those statements are not true. This is what it states on page 343 of the local plan section for Wycombe 8.42. A development envelope has been drawn around Wycombe to define the built-up part of the village where development, infill and allocation sites may be permitted. The purpose is to prevent sprawl into the surrounding countryside. Development of infill sites will need to be in line with policy growth 2. It also goes on to say, outside the development envelope, housing will not normally be permitted unless there are exceptional circumstances, such as essential dwellings for rural workers or affordable housing. Whilst it is acknowledged that this is a brownfield site, we would expect exceptional design in a rural, open, prominent location such as this. This design is not exceptional.
The tandem layout of the dwellings is not in keeping with the vicinity. Most development is linear. The site is at the entry point to the village from the west and will have a clear visual impact. These houses show limited design interest and are far more dense than other properties of this size nearby. Wycombe has and continues to maintain the need for smaller sized dwellings. Some of you may remember I sat here some 18 months ago to challenge a development of 6 large dwellings at the other end of the village along Church Road. We were very grateful to the planning committee in supporting our request for a mixed development, including 2 to 3 bed houses. These have duly been built and it has been seen as a good example of a development we wish to see in Wycombe. Even the developer himself has acknowledged that the small units were the ones that sold quickly, with the large ones taking some 12 months longer to sell. This supports our argument for the need for small dwellings in Wycombe. We ask councillors to strongly consider what principles are being applied here. As a parish, we are fed up with mixed messages. In summary, this application is contrary to the local plan Growth 2 development envelope for Wycombe. Wycombe maintains its need for smaller 2-bed dwellings. East Cambs does not need these houses to meet its housing supply. None of these houses are affordable, nor for rural workers or of exceptional design. Therefore, the development cannot be deemed to have material planning considerations. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, have we got questions for Liz Horton, the Chair of Wycombe Parish Council? Christine.
Hello. On several occasions, you have mentioned rural workers. Would you actually describe as a rural worker?
Sorry, I suppose when the plan was drawn up, it was looking about rural working from agricultural perspectives, because Wycombe is a very rural, agriculturally based environment. I understand what you're going to say, which is about home workers, but I think at the time the plan was drawn up, that's what it was about.
Well, even when the plan was drawn up, how many agricultural companies actually employed volume, employees? Very few. I
wouldn't know.
I'm born and bred and lived in an agricultural environment, so I am aware that
we have a number of residents.
If I may interrupt, I suspect what the Wycombe Parish Council are trying to say, low income essential local workers. I suspect that's how I've interpreted it.
I was quoting what is in the local plan.
Right. You seem disinclined to welcome incoming families to Wycombe. I just wonder why that is. Ely, Littleport, Soham, we're building hundreds of houses and welcoming these people into our communities. I wonder why the people of Wycombe are so insular that you feel threatened in some way.
No, this isn't about welcoming people. We very much welcome people into Wycombe, and we're doing that with a 35% increase that we've already taken on. And we do ask them what this is about is looking at ensuring we can assimilate those people readily into our small community. Assimilate or encourage them in. For Littleport and Soham, you have the services. At the moment, we've got a medical centre at Soham that is absolutely under the cosh and is struggling to expand because of various issues I'm sure you as members can appreciate. So there's issues with GP services. We have primary school children that go by taxi and bus and personally driven by their parents to 5 or 6 different schools in the vicinity, because that is what it's like to live in a village with no school. We have an ageing population. We want to see the young families, which is why we want to keep the young people in the village that want to stay in the village and continue that. We have had a very successful affordable housing scheme, which some of our rural workers use and occupy, as well as some of the youngsters. And we have got a very skewed housing mix that doesn't help those youngsters come in. What we either get are professional people that keep themselves to themselves in the large houses. It is, but that's why as a parish council, we're trying to ensure a fair balance in our community.
If I can now, bring that to an end. More members, we've got Mr. Goodall.
Thank you, Chair.
I beg your pardon, I should have said count.
Going on the site today, what would you like to do with that site then? If we're not going to develop it into housing, what would you like to do with it? Because it's an eyesore at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. It is a total eyesore. I don't think the parish council would have a problem if we had the smaller units. As Councillor Trapp said earlier, why not 4, 2 to 3 beds? As I say, the church road site, if you remember when I came last year, that church road site, which we thought is a nice mix of 2, a 3 and a couple of 4s. And that's a nice mix. And those small units went like that, they were bought off plan. And there's one, the last big one has only just been sold.
Mr. Trapp.
The encouragement of having smaller houses, is that preserve a generational mix within the village?
Yes.
Is there evidence that children of residents want to stay in the village with their
A lot
families?
of them have moved away. A lot, I can name several people that are actually bringing their children up in Soham because they can't afford to buy anywhere in Wickham.
Well,
There are no small units to purchase.
I know a friend of my son's who's had to move to Littleport, which is a blessing, I think, but because they just cannot afford to be in Wickham. And so that would, and also it would it change the character of the villagers, having the young staying there?
Well, you would like to think so. You need the youngsters coming through in anything.
Okay.
You need it. You need the youngsters to come through, whether that's children, the young folk, to support all the amenities, and the pub that's struggling, that's only just reopened because it closed. It's one of our last things. So we need the youngsters coming through. We really do.
Good. Well, I'm very glad you were able to assimilate 35%.
We're trying our best. We're trying our best.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Did you have a hard copy of that speech you just gave?
Yes, other than the very initial.
I was going to say, is it possible you could leave it on this desk so it would help making notes?
Yeah, and also just on this site, those 3 areas, those 2 plots either side of number 9 Stretton Road were all one. It was Second Breeds Farm once upon a time.
Okay.
So it's the same applicant all the way through.
Thank you. Now we're finished with questions to the chair of Wickham Parish Council, so it's a ward councillor now. I think you know the rules. Start when you wish.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, colleagues. First of all, I think I should say Happy Christmas because I'm not sure I'm going to see many of you between now and then. I want to just start by thanking Richard for his comprehensive report and indeed for keeping in touch with me throughout the application process. I'll be very sorry to lose him from the council, but I'll thank him very much for his work. So I look at these applications as a ward councillor, but firstly, I look at them as a local young person. And, as Liz has just explained, the current housing market is incredibly difficult, especially in East Cambridgeshire. The price is higher than average. And what's worse, nobody seems to want to build smaller or affordable houses in rural villages like Wickham. The solution does lie here at Planning Committee, make no mistake about that. Our local plan specifically requires smaller houses in Wickham within the development envelope. And this application falls short in too many ways. So I'm here today to draw committee's attention to an application it rejected in August. It's called 2201-229 FUL. It was on Chapel Lane in Wickham, you'll remember. on the grounds that the proposed material considerations were insufficient to depart from growth 2. And that proposal was outside the development envelope, just like this one. Former decisions are material considerations, so I have to ask colleagues, please bear this in mind. Another house, the little singular house outside the development envelope, I've said before and I'll say again, it's not a justification. You can't just change the street scene whilst ignoring the development envelope and then go, well, the street scene's changed, so now we'll put some more on because it's different. Both of them contravene policy. The situation on the ground only changed because we contravened policy. I'm going to give brief airtime to the proposal's merits. The biodiversity improvement here is incredible, and I commend it very much. And it also does build on brownfield land, which the National Planning Policy Framework indicates is relevant. However, I believe that's far from sufficient reasoning to depart from policy. The proposal would contradict other policies which negate that consideration. And Wycombe Parish Council is correct. You know, this application shows a total lack of awareness about the village in which it is proposed to be built. It creates a new street scene in the countryside, even if it's only slightly outside the village, and that's not permissible. I would also argue that the depth of the proposed area and the style of housing layout contravenes EMV1 of the local plan, even if the visual amenity of the brownfield land was improved. I would, as Councillor Trapp, I think, was insinuating, I would be more likely to support this application if smaller market houses or indeed affordable houses were proposed on this site, as Wycombe's regulations in the local plan actually call for, even though it would still be outside the development envelope. I would instead be sitting here going, well, I'm not happy about the development envelope, but this is what we need. I do appreciate that there are under 10 houses here, so we've got HOU 1 doesn't apply. But the thing is, it has no effect across the village. Wycombe, I think, has had 2 markets, 2-bedroom houses in the last 5 years. I'm looking towards Liz, but I think that's right. And that's just simply not enough. Wycombe doesn't have any appropriate infrastructure to sustain any form of speculative development wherever it's located. And it is frankly disappointing that developers repeatedly contradict this requirement. East Cambridgeshire District Council has to maintain its precedent. Departing from growth 2 is only permissible when the area in question can cope. I'll refer to the applicant's comments. Yes, it's close to a bus stop for the 1 bus a week that comes. So I frankly feel that the infrastructure has not been considered properly and the committee should apply weighting to that. And if committee were to approve this application, it would permit by precedent many further large houses on sites surrounding Wycombe. The effect of this is to push young families out of this really beautiful village, and it secures no investment in the infrastructure or community. The pub has only just reopened, and that was quite fortunate. The committee has in the past, I must remind colleagues, turned all such development down. Growth in East Cambs is obviously inevitable, as we know, but it must be strictly infrastructure first. It must be community led, and more importantly than anything, it must be policy compliant because we fought hard for that policy. And Wycombe doesn't yet have a neighbourhood plan to supersede any of it. This application doesn't meet those 3 criteria: infrastructure first, community led, and policy compliant. So I strongly recommend the committee refuse planning permission for land northwest of 9 Stretton Road, Wycombe, on the grounds of non-compliance with growth 2 with no material considerations sufficiently mitigating. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Questions for Councillor Vellacott? Go ahead.
So you're willing to go, if they were smaller units, 2-bedroom, you'll be willing to forego the planning envelope?
Let's be fair. This site, as it's rightly been mentioned, is not an attractive area. So something should be done with it. I would argue that if the application hadn't come in, nobody would have noticed, but something should be done with it anyway. I wouldn't be comfortable sitting here going, yeah, forget about the development envelope that Wycombe fought really hard for, you know, building the countryside. It is countryside development. But in my mind, when I'm thinking of the young families who want to stay in Wycombe, or I'm thinking of maybe myself in 5-10 years' time, do I want to live in a rural village? Do I even have the option? Then fair enough. A site like that on brownfield with smaller, maybe even affordable housing, I think is a sufficient mitigation. But I think at the moment that proposal would fall short.
Any more questions for Councillor Vellacott? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed. We've now got comments from the officer, which presumably you'll be making some notes and you want to make a couple of points.
Thank you, Chair. Just one comment to make, really, and it's sort of acknowledge the comments from the Parish Council and Councillor Vellacott regarding the issue with housing mix, as the proposal is for 2 3-beds and 2 4-bed dwellings. However, there is no policy requirement for specific housing mix on a development of this size, as Councillor Vellacott has said. So if members were minded to refuse planning permission on the basis of the housing mix, members need to be mindful that there would be a significant risk of costs against the council if the applicant was to appeal that decision for a refusal reason on that basis.
Okay, I think that was just I think that was an extra point that Councillor Vellacott, I don't think that was what that was his main thrust. Have you got any more statements you want to make?
No.
No, okay. Members, questions to the officer? Well, I think it's Christine first.
Would this brownfield site slightly out of Wycombe, would that qualify as a rural exception site?
Generally, yes. So in terms of rural exception sites, if you was to provide a rural exception site for affordable housing, it's the sort of location that would be close enough to the village that would normally be considered acceptable. But the issue with a sort of small development of this size would normally be that housing association wouldn't be interested in taking on a site of only four houses. So it'd be normally sort of bigger sites with more houses on for an exception site.
Yes, go on.
What would be the planning department's view on, say, a couple of terraces of 4 2-bedroom dwellings?
I mean, we can only really comment on the proposal that's in front of us.
We are judging, if I may interrupt, we are judging the case in front of us and not speculating on what may or may not be in the future.
Okay.
For good all.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard on a number of times that the developer wanted 7 dwellings on there originally, and you, as a planning department, got that changed to the 4. How many of them 7 were 2-bedroom places?
So that was part of pre-application advice. There was never any formal planning application for that. So I'm not even sure whether there was any sort of indication of sort of bed sizes at that stage. But I mean, we've never had a formal application, so it's not really a relevant consideration for this planning application. It was just pre-application advice.
Councillor Trapp.
Quite a number of questions. One is, I don't see there's a report from the LFFA, the Flood Authority, and I noticed in 1 or 2 of the slides you had, there's a bit of water around. Should we not have a flood authority?
No, so the lead local flood authority are only statutory consultees on sites that are for major developments. So this doesn't comprise a major development. So it's down to the local planning authority to manage the impacts of drainage. So what we would do, as recommended in the conditions, is there would be a recommended condition for surface water drainage details and foul drainage details. If we feel it necessary to consult anybody on that, it would be with our internal building regs department to advise us on drainage matters.
Sorry,
we have concerns.
Was not aware of that. Councillor Horton mentioned that the planning application never came to the council and was determined, it was outside the development boundary. Shouldn't have that come to the this planning committee? The fact that it was outside the planning envelope.
Certainly in the way we interpret the council's constitution since then, we had discussions around probably around a similar time to that planning application being approved, if not, I think slightly after actually, where the issue was raised that departure developments should go to planning committee. I'm not sure historically whether that always happened. I think it was probably an issue that was realised following sort of quite soon after that planning application was approved.
Okay, thank you. And I have one further question, which is looking at the plan of Wicken that you showed, almost all of it is linear in the sense it's fronting the street. And this seems to be a tandem, and this was mentioned, I think, in the parish council report as well. Would that be something we should be supporting? Would that something we should be encouraging? Have linear forms where the village actually is already almost always linear?
I think it's actually sort of highlighted in my committee report as well, that it acknowledges that that the sort of development in depth is not in character with that part of the area. However, and it's generally something that we would generally sort of not encourage, but you have to. We have to look at this site as a whole and consider the planning merits of this site as a whole, being that, you know, it's mostly brownfield land. You need to consider the material considerations of this as a whole. If it was just an open field, it's probably likely we would have a very different view on that. But as there is already the site is already there, it's sort of predominantly brownfield land. There's the residential land to the back. There's obviously sort of the fencing and gates to the back of it as well. There is some storage containers on the site as well, and a lot of hard standing and gravel. It's very much one of them applications where you have to look at these things on a site-by-site basis and look at the whole application in the round really, and consider whether the conflict with the development plan, whether or not that's outweighed by the other material considerations that might be that it's going to, you know, a proposal might tidy the site up and look more attractive and have a sort of more appealing visual impact on the countryside. And I mean, that's, you know, that's a matter really for members to kind of come to a view on today, really.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd just like to ask a question. I think you've answered it already this afternoon. Is that the exceptions you were quoting were for single houses in other applications when you were talking about building outside the building line? And am I right?
So the one within East Cambridgeshire, that was for one house. I believe one of the appeal decisions that we refer to outside of the development framework was one at Waterbeach, and that was, I think, that was for more than one house, possibly four, but
this was 7 and it's been reduced to 4.
They proposed 7 houses at pre-application advice stage.
Then they
we advised not to go ahead with that.
Sitting in front of
They
us.
come in for 4.
Yeah, and this is the first house you see as you come. This isn't filling in a gap. This is the first house you'll see as you come into Wicken from Streatham.
Correct. On that side of the road, it would be.
On that side of the road, yes, I understand there's houses the other side. What I'm a little bit confused of, it seems this was an agricultural field. I don't know how long ago, and I suppose you don't know either. But it was an agricultural field. Someone's turned it into a very unsightly bit of land. And now the fact that it is brownfield is now the reason why we're sitting here considering giving it permission.
Yeah, I mean that's quite often in the case. Yeah, so yeah, Simon's just pointing out that the sort of the change of use of the garden land was from meadow to garden. So I'm not entirely sure, and I mean the applicant's sort of putting his hand up, and the parish council may also wish to comment as well. They, as sort of the local people, they may know sort of better than I what the land used to be historically. But yes, I mean, in terms of the council approving the land for a storage use, you know, if that was considered acceptable at the time, it's, you know, we are now in a position where we may say, you know, it's.
So yes, it was given the permission for storage units, and now it's. the
Yeah, and
application
it-
is to change it to build.
And at the time, it may have been completely completely acceptable for that site to change use to
Yes, I
to
accept that.
commercial use,
I
but
accept that.
now, yeah.
If I may interrupt, and it's an exceptional thing, but you've got your hands up and clearly there's something you're desperate to say. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. We've now gone to all the questions to the office. I beg your pardon.
One further question, which I forgot to mention. You mentioned that the bungalows are single story, but I see Velux windows on the roofs line here in the plan, the elevation plans. So is that going to be, is that just a loft space, or is that going to be a further bedroom or other?
So
or
the
billiard room, perhaps?
The recommended conditions within the report include the removal of permitted development rights, which includes those permitted development rights that would allow for dormer windows or roof lights to be added into the bungalows. So they would need to apply for planning permission to make any sort of alterations to those dwellings.
But at the moment, there seems to be two Velux windows there on. Oh, is it PV? It's very small ones. There's a very big PV one in the back of the house.
Yeah, there is two roof lights. So just bear with me. Yeah, so there's two roof lights, both shown over the living room. But I mean, there's certainly no first floor accommodation shown within that. And if you look at the space above the living room, to actually sort of fit any sort of first floor accommodation in there, I'd imagine you'd need to increase the roof height anyway, because it it's just not tall enough. But I mean, regardless, we have recommended conditions on there that remove permitted development rights to add sort of further dormers in.
Yeah,
and
I
so
just
on.
wanted to clear up the roof lights. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, we've finished questions to the officer, and we've now got Councillor Wilson. Oh, you're waiting to go to debate. Right, we are now in the debate section, and Councillor Wilson is the first speaker.
Thank you. We were told that basically what we're doing on this site is we're accepting it because it's brownfield site. But not all the land's brownfield. In fact, the two big houses in the front are on brownfield site, but the two at the back are not on brownfield land at all. So there's no logical reason for accepting that, because they're quite clearly on area which is either garden land or open countryside. So I think we should not be accepting this proposal, because if you didn't have those houses at the back, you could have had an extra house between those two houses, which would be three houses on brownfield site, and it would be a linear development rather than this encouragement of going further back out of the village area. And it would be not seen as you're coming into a building, because what you're doing is coming into a village, and it should be rural, and you've got a few houses on the edge, and it would be better to have a house than that rotty thing we've got at the moment with those horrible leylandii. But even so, we don't need the ones at the back, and I therefore not at all keen on having them there. And if they don't want to have any house on there and they want four houses, they'd have to be smaller. So I suggest that we don't accept this application. We turn it down on the grounds that it's outside the village envelope, against our policy, and it's the brownfield site area is only a portion of this land, and the rest of it shouldn't be built on. And we are asking to build on this thing, spoiling the entry into Wickham, and there's no good reason for it. So I'll be against this proposal, prepared to vote against it.
Okay, well, I'm making a note that you've got, is that a proposal to,
oppose this application on the grounds that it's outside the village envelope area.
okay, so
and not on the ground.
we've logged in your proposal, but we'll continue the debate. Councillor Goodall.
Thank you very much, Chair. Rather than refuse, because we've heard from Councillor Vellacott and the parish council, they're quite willing to accept a linear frontage with smaller housing.
That's not
Could we
no.
defer? Could we defer this?
It would be a different application. It's not the same application. I'm sure the planning manager will correct me if I'm wrong, but no, you can't do that. The applicant may hear what you're saying and may decide that's a course of action. In many cases, people do that. However, the application is in front of you, is the application in front of you. And that's got to be decided yes or no. Or it could be deferred for some other reason, of course, but what you're suggesting is a different use of that land. And that,
no, I'm saying it can be used for developing houses.
Yes.
But in a linear.
Yes, that would be a different application.
And they reapply for a different.
It would be a different applicant. That, of course, is always a possibility. We are now on Christine Ambrose Smith before Councillor Lay. Christine.
What particularly appealed to me is there are two single-storey dwellings. I won't call them by that repulsive name, bungalows. I couldn't live in a house because, you know, I can't do stairs. There must be more of me around. A 3-bedroom house is a reasonable size house. And, you know, if you can live on one level, how good is that? You turn this application down and you are denying perhaps 2 families a single-storey house. It could not be an adult, it could be a child that needs, you know, single-storey accommodation. Perhaps we just need to bear that in mind.
Thank you, Councillor Lay.
Yes, I just wondered whether or not we might suggest to the applicant that this might be the right time to withdraw this application because a refusal might not be the right way to go. And there is a willingness on this side of the fence, it seems, for a linear development there. So, Chair, I'm just voicing an opinion that perhaps to withdraw this application might be the right way to go and to resubmit it in a format that would be acceptable to the councillors on this side of the chain. Thank you.
I think we only have the choice of rejecting. I think the point has been made by various members that a development and a linear development and smalling houses might, if you were sitting on the committee when that was heard, might enjoy a favourable reaction. But that's not what we're talking about, the application that's in front of us now. So have we got Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chairman. We've fought long and hard for these development envelopes. And we should be going against the development envelopes, 1, at our peril, and 2, only when there are exceptional circumstances. I cannot see that there are exceptional circumstances on that site to put 4 on there going back into the, what I will call garden land. I think we would all agree the brownfield bit needs tidying up, and there are appropriate ways of doing that, which probably will involve housing. But as it stands, I cannot support this application, and I'm more than happy to second Councillor Wilson's proposal for refusal on the grounds that it's outside the development envelope.
I've listened to the debate. and I totally concur with Councillor Brown's opinion. I think we have fought very hard to get control of out of area developments. This is another one that's creeping towards Streatham, and so I'm totally in favour of supporting Councillor Brown's opinion. And I think we send a message by debating this in public. I think it's a very good thing that we've had a public debate, so everybody knows where everybody comes from and what people are feeling like, and it's a good thing. But I feel that we have an application in front of me which has been proposed by Councillor Wilson to not approve it, and Councillor Brown is seconding that. I've indicated my support for it, but we already have a proposer and a seconder. Now, while we're in the debate section, has anybody else got anything they want to say? Councillor Trapp.
May I contradict the assertion by some people this is an ugly site? This site is actually redolent of many of the countryside, little sort of brownfield development site with sort of old buildings and, you know, decaying things. It's wonderful. It's treasure trove. We should be preserving this for future generations, you know. It should be made. But I agree. Having said it is actually, I could spend hours in that state.
I'm sure you could.
But I do think that we ought to be. Why have we got development boundaries? It's for this thing that we're saying this is a village, or the village should be contained within this area, and we should not be outside of it. So I think I would be supporting Councillor Wilson's and Brown with this.
Okay. Well, have we got any other opinions that are likely to arise? And you better, Councillor Wilson, you better be thinking about the reasons you're going to go.
I think the reason is quite clear. It is outside the village envelope, and that is a good enough reason. I don't think we ought to add a lot of extra ones unless.
So, yeah, Chair, I think what you could do is, because it seems to me that the main concern is about the depth of development and the two houses at the back, isn't it? That's of more concern than the frontage. So I think if you had a reason for refusal that acknowledged that was the main concern, because it's not just the policy you're conflicting with, it's you've got to identify what harm you're concerned about. So I think if you said something along the lines of, in the opinion of the local planning authority, the proposed development would harm the character and appearance of the countryside by excessive depth of development rear of the B8 storage area and beyond the brownfield element of the site. And then you acknowledge that the proposal therefore conflicts with policy growth 2 of the East Cambridge District Local Plan as amended in 2023. So it's implicit in there that you may be amenable to a future application on the frontage, because what you're concerned about is the depth of development, the two at the back. So if you just highlight that.
I think there is general concern from the committee about the size of the houses involved, and some reference to that, I think. I'm putting words in Councillor Wilson's.
I think Richard was steering you away from that because you don't have a policy on housing mix for this scale.
Okay.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's your proposal, that's your choice, and I back it. So we're going to go to, are we clear what's being voted for? It is a refusal on the grounds, only on the grounds of outside of the building line or the development envelope.
So that what I read out is not what you.
Yes, I think.
Because that acknowledges the harm that you're concerned about, and then the policy.
Yes, I think the planning manager's suggestion is excellent. So are those in favour of refusing planning permission on the grounds of the comments or the details given by the planning manager? Please raise their hands. Okay. Those who are in support of the application, one, and are there any abstentions? No. Okay, so that has been rejected.
And I think the applicant's heard the debate and knows what to do really, to get something on that land.
We're now on the planning performance report. And it's over to the planning manager.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take any questions on performance. Just to mention, Councillor Vellacott mentioned this is Richard Fitzjohn's last planning committee. He's been a brilliant officer. He's been a contractor and he's also been a permanent officer beforehand. So we wish him all the best for the future and congratulate him on all the work he's done over the years and his presentations, and always giving you a balanced view and trying his best, and doesn't always succeed, as we all know that. You're a tough lot to persuade. That's all I can say. Thanks, Chair.
I feel we only have one serious message to get across to you, and that's that I personally wish you a very happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year. I'm sure I'll see most of you between now and then, but formally I'd like to say thank you very much for your support of me in my role here. And thank goodness we've got Councillor Trapp to keep us, keep our brains going all the time. So thank you and happy Christmas. And the meeting is now closed.